Hello friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. On the night of October 14th, 2023, at 9:50 p.m., the Ring doorbell camera at a quiet suburban home in Riverside, California, activated. 3 figures emerged from the darkness, their movements synchronized and deliberate. Their costumes were something from a fever dream. Tattered robes, animal masks with vacant eyes, and unnerving smiles painted across pale, expressionless faces. To any neighbor scrolling past, it was a late-night Halloween prank. But Marissa Allen, the nurse who lived inside, was about to learn that some pranks have a terrifyingly different purpose. When the figures returned 5 minutes later, they were holding a small cage containing a dead bird. They left without a word, vanishing back into the shadows. By the time police arrived, the only evidence was the chilling footage and a series of chalk symbols drawn on the pavement leading to her property. The big question wasn't just who they were, but what their silent, ritualistic display was meant to communicate. The investigation hit a dead end. The masks were untraceable, the robes were generic, and the whispers on the audio were unintelligible. Online, the theories began to spiral. The more pragmatic viewers suggested it was an elaborate, cruel hoax by local teenagers. But that theory didn't hold up under the weight of the final piece of evidence. The next morning, taped to Marissa's door, was a single typewritten note. "We see you too." This was no simple prank. It was a declaration. The most disturbing theory, one that gained traction in true crime forums, was that this was a targeted act of psychological terror by a local group using occult symbolism, not to rob, but to unnerve and claim dominance over the watched. The case remains open. The 3 visitors never identified, leaving Marissa and the entire community with a lingering sense of being observed. The Riverside incident became a viral cornerstone, the first in a series of similarly unsettling doorbell footage to emerge from California, each one proving that the terror of the unknown was now being delivered directly to our front doors. October 14th, 2023, 9:50 p.m. Riverside, California. The chime of the Ring doorbell was a sound Marissa Allen usually associated with Amazon deliveries and neighborhood kids retrieving lost balls. That night, it was an intrusion. She had just gotten home from a double shift at Riverside Community Hospital, the kind of shift that left a metallic taste of exhaustion in her mouth and made the bones of her feet ache. The last thing she wanted was a visitor. Slumped on her sofa, still in her blue scrubs, she thumbed open the live view on her phone. The screen, illuminated in a grainy, green-tinged night vision, showed 3 figures standing shoulder to shoulder on her porch. They were utterly still. Their costumes were elaborate, far beyond the cheap plastic masks and polyester capes of typical Halloween fare. They wore robes of a coarse, dark material that seemed to absorb the porch light. Tattered at the hem as if they'd walked for miles. Their faces were hidden behind animal masks: a stag, a boar, and a fox, crafted from what looked like aged leather and real. Dull horns on the stag. The most unsettling detail, the one that made Marissa's breath catch, was the smiles. Each mask had a walled rictus grin painted in a stark, bone-white paint, a cruel parody of joy that didn't reach the empty black holes where their eyes should have been. "Seriously?" she muttered to the empty room. It was a prank. It had to be. Riverside's teens were creative, but this was a new level of commitment. With a sigh of irritation, not fear, she dismissed the notification. "Knock yourselves out," she thought. "I'm not playing." She dragged herself to the kitchen to microwave a forgotten dinner. The image of the silent, masked trio already fading, relegated to the status of a minor nuisance. But they didn't leave. The first knock was tentative, then another, and another, until they coalesced into a rhythm. It wasn't random. It was a pattern. 3 rapid taps, a pause, 2 slower ones, then a single final thud. Tap, 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 thud. It repeated, a sinister Morse code on her front door. Annoyance began to curdle into a low-grade anxiety. She crept back towards the foyer, not turning on any lights, and pressed her ear against the cool wood of the door. That's when she heard it. Whispers. They were low, sibilant, weaving between the knocks. She couldn't make out words at first, just the hushed, breathy sound of them. Then, a fragment, clear as ice. Marissa. Her blood ran cold. How did they know her name? She stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. The rational part of her brain, the nurse who dealt with trauma and chaos daily, was screaming that this was wrong. This was not a prank. Pranksters yelled and ran. They didn't stand in eerie silence, knock in rhythms, and whisper your name. She thought about calling the police, but a flush of embarrassment stopped her. What would I say? "Officer, there are some very dedicated trick-or-treaters on my porch?" After what felt like an eternity, the knocking ceased. She heard the soft crunch of gravel as they retreated down her driveway. Relief, warm and heady, washed over her. She let out a shaky breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. It was over. 5 minutes later, the doorbell chimed again. This time, the sound was a jolt of pure adrenaline. Her hand trembled as she lifted the phone. They were back. The 3 figures stood in the same formation, but now the one in the center, the stag, was holding something. It was a small, antique bird cage, the kind made from thin, curved metal. Inside, lying on its side on the bare floor of the cage, was a bird. A house finch, its vibrant red breast muted and still in the monochrome night vision. It was clearly dead. This was no longer an intrusion. It was a violation. The dead bird was a symbol, a message she couldn't decipher, and that made it infinitely more terrifying. The fox-masked figure lifted a hand and laid it, palm flat, against the camera lens. For a full 3 seconds, the screen went completely black. When the hand withdrew, they were already turning away, melting back into the darkness from which they came. This time, Marissa didn't hesitate. She called the police, her voice thin and reedy as she explained the situation to the dispatcher. The two officers who responded were polite but palpably skeptical. They took her statement, scanned the footage on her phone, and walked the perimeter of her property with heavy-duty flashlights. "Kids," the older officer concluded, his tone final. "Morbid sense of humor, but kids nonetheless. Probably thought the dead bird was the pinnacle of edgy comedy." "But they knew my name," Marissa insisted, her voice pleading. "Could have looked you up online," the younger officer offered. "Voter registrations are public, or they might know you from the neighborhood. It's unsettling, Ms. Allen, but without an explicit threat or property damage, there's not much we can do." They left her with a case number and a recommendation to get a motion-activated floodlight. The message was clear: you're on your own. It was this dismissal that led the footage to my inbox. As a producer and researcher for a true crime documentary channel, I specialize in stitching together fragments of the inexplicable. Marissa, desperate for answers her local police wouldn't provide, sent the video to our tip line. At first glance, it fit the profile of a well-executed hoax. But something about the stillness of the figures, the specific choice of animals, and the chillingly deliberate act with the birdcage gnawed at me. I requested the raw video file from her Ring account. I slowed it down, enhanced the audio, and ran it through various filters. It was in the infrared spectrum that I found it. The porch light and the camera's own IR illuminator had washed it out, but when isolated, the footage revealed a detail everyone had missed. On the sidewalk, directly in front of her house, were a series of symbols drawn in chalk. They weren't visible to the naked eye, but the camera's sensor, sensitive to a broader light spectrum, had picked up the reflected IR light. They were intricate, geometric designs, a circle intersected by a jagged line, a series of interconnected triangles, something that looked like a stylized eye. They weren't random graffiti. They were sigils, a marker. The visitors hadn't just come to her door. They had consecrated the ground leading to it. I called Marissa immediately, my professional calm frayed by the discovery. I told her to stay with a friend, to not be home alone that night. She was packing an overnight bag when the sun rose on the morning of October 15th. It was in the cold, gray light of dawn that she saw it. A plain white business envelope, neatly taped to her front door at eye level. There was no address, no stamp, just her first name, typed in a simple, common font. Hands shaking. She called me, and I told her to wait for me before touching it. When I arrived, we put on gloves. Inside the envelope was a single sheet of printer paper. On it, 4 words were centered, written in the same anonymous typeface. "We see you too." The message was a perfect, terrifying inversion. The doorbell camera, the tool meant to grant her vision and control, had been turned against her. She was not the watcher. She was the watched. The we implied a collective, an organization, a presence. The two confirmed they knew about her camera, about her attempt to see them. They were asserting a horrifying parody. Marissa moved out of the Riverside house within the week. She couldn't sleep there. couldn't shake the feeling of being observed. The footage, which I compiled with her permission, including the enhanced IR shots of the chalk sigils and a read of the typed note, spread like a digital virus. Dubbed the Riverside Ritual, it was dissected on forums and YouTube channels. Were they a cult? A group of augmented reality gamers gone rogue? Performance artists? The police, now facing public pressure, reopened the case but found no new leads. The chalk had been washed away by a morning sprinkler system. The note yielded no fingerprints. Marissa Allen tried to return to her old life, but the experience had left a hairline fracture in her reality. She jumped at shadows, checked her doorbell app compulsively, and never again dismissed a late-night notification as a prank. For me, the Riverside Ritual was a beginning. It was the first thread I pulled, and as it unraveled, it revealed a tapestry of similar, disconnected incidents up and down the state of California. Each one was a silent scream captured in high definition, a piece of evidence that raised more questions than it answered. The Riverside incident was not an anomaly. It was a prototype. And as I would soon discover, the next chapter was already waiting in a quiet San Jose neighborhood, where a single father named Derek Campos was about to learn that the most terrifying visitor is not one who knocks, but one who stands in perfect, motionless silence. February 3rd, 2024, 2:07 a.m., San Jose, California. The ping from his Blink camera was the last thing Derek Campos registered before sleep took him. He'd been dozing on the sofa, the blue glow of a late-night baseball replay flickering across the room, a half-finished beer on the coffee table. It was a ritual born of avoidance. The silence of his house after 10 p.m. was a heavy living thing, and the living room was easier to bear than the profound stillness of the bedroom he'd once shared. He grumbled, fumbling for his phone on the cushion beside him. He thumbed the notification open, expecting a raccoon tipping over the garbage cans or the neighbor's cat slinking through the flower beds. It was a child. A little girl, no more than 7 or 8, stood perfectly centered in the frame of his front porch. The porch light, which was motion-activated, haloed her in a stark, yellow glare. She wore a simple, light-colored nightdress, though the night was cold, and her small feet were bare against the painted wooden floorboards. She wasn't moving. Her arms hung limp at her sides, and her head was tilted up, not at the door, but directly into the eye of the camera lens. It was as if she was looking through it, right at him. Derek's breath hitched. All traces of sleep vanished, replaced by a surge of adrenaline that was part confusion, part deep-seated paternal alarm. A lost kid? At this hour? His first, overwhelming instinct was to help. He was at the door in 3 long strides, unlocking the deadbolt and pulling it open. The chill night air rushed in. The porch was empty. He stepped out, his own bare feet recoiling from the cold wood. "Hello?" he called into the darkness, his voice cutting through the quiet hum of suburban night. "Kid, are you okay?" There was no answer. He scanned the manicured lawn, the empty driveway, the dark street. Nothing. It was as if she had evaporated. A prickle of unease traced its way down his spine. He walked to the edge of the porch and looked down the side of the house into the narrow, pitch-black alley that separated his property from his neighbor's. The darkness there was absolute. Shaking his head, he retreated inside, locking the door firmly behind him. Must have been dreaming, he told himself, a flimsy defense against the growing unease. He pulled up the video history on his phone, needing to confirm what he'd seen. There she was, 2:07:14 a.m. The girl, staring. The video had no audio, but he watched as his own front door suddenly opened from the inside. The moment the door began to swing inward, the girl reacted. It wasn't a startle. It was a release. She spun on her heel with an unnatural fluidity and darted, not down the porch steps to the driveway, but to the side, vanishing instantly into the black mouth of the alley. The entire encounter, from his door opening to her disappearance, lasted less than 2 seconds. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. He played it again, and again. It was on the 4th viewing, his thumb pausing the video just as the girl began to turn, that he saw it. His blood went from cold to frozen. In the dark, polished glass of his front living room window, reflected in the corner of the camera's frame, was a second figure. It was a tall, dark shape, standing just at the edge of his lawn, where the light from the porch didn't reach. It was formless, more a concentration of shadow than a person, but its proportions were wrong. Too tall, too broad, its head a featureless oval. It was impossible to determine any details, but its orientation was clear. It was watching the girl, waiting. The police were more responsive than they had been in Riverside. A missing, possibly endangered child trumped masked figures. 2 officers arrived, and Derek showed them the footage. Their professional demeanors tightened. They took a full report, and with high-powered flashlights, they conducted a thorough search of the property, focusing on the alley. They found nothing. No sign of the girl, no dropped toy, no scuff marks. But they did find something else, or rather, a lack of something. In the damp, soft earth of the flower bed that ran along the alley, they found a single set of small, shallow footprints, consistent with a child's bare feet. They led from the direction of the street, ended directly below Derek's porch, and then the prints pointed back the way they came, matching her flight. There were no other prints. No adult-sized footprints, no evidence whatsoever of the hulking shadow he had seen reflected in the window. "Are you sure about what you saw in the reflection, Mr. Campos?" one of the officers asked, his tone carefully neutral. The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. Derek just nodded, the first seeds of profound isolation taking root. The official report would later conclude, unidentified juvenile, likely sleepwalking, no evidence of foul play. The case was closed. But for Derek, it had just been opened. He didn't tell the police everything. He couldn't, because the girl's appearance had unlocked a vault in his heart he kept sealed with sheer force of will. 2 years prior, his own daughter, Sophia, had died. A sudden, brutal case of meningitis that stole her away in less than 48 hours. She had been 7, the girl on the camera, while not an exact likeness, shared Sophia's slight build, the same way she held her head. The coincidence was a knife twisting in a wound that had never healed. His rational mind knew it couldn't be her, but the part of him that was still a father, the part that screamed into the void every single night, wasn't rational. The guilt he carried, the what-ifs and if-onlys, now had a new focal point. What if that was a lost, frightened child, and he had failed her? What if it was something else, something he couldn't name, and his failure was of a different kind? The paternal fear he felt was no longer abstract. It was a ghost wearing his daughter's face. For 3 weeks, the house was a prison of his own anxiety. He slept with the lights on, checked the camera feed every hour, and kept the alleyway flooded with a new, painfully bright security light he'd installed himself. Then, on the morning of February 26th, another notification. 2:11 a.m. His hand trembled as he opened the app. It was the same camera angle, the same stark porch light, but the girl was not there. Instead, standing in the exact spot where the shadow had been reflected weeks before, was the shadow itself. It was no longer a reflection. It was physically present on his lawn, a tall, impossibly dark silhouette that seemed to drink the light around it. It was turned, facing the camera, a void where a face should be. It had returned, but the girl was gone. It had come alone. Derek did not open the door. He did not call the police. He simply sat in the dark living room, watching the live feed until the sun rose. The figure never moved. When the first rays of dawn touched the lawn, it was simply gone. I received Derek's email on March 1st. It was a long, rambling, and heartbreaking message. He had included both video clips and a condensed version of his story, his grief palpable in every line. He was desperate for an answer that didn't force him to choose between a haunting and a monstrous crime. I wrote back immediately, asking for the raw video files and permission to investigate, but I received no reply. 2 days later, a welfare check was conducted at the request of his concerned sister. The police found the San Jose house unlocked and empty. There were no signs of a struggle. Derek's wallet, keys, and phone were on the kitchen counter. On the sofa, where he'd spent so many sleepless nights, a single sheet of notebook paper lay. On it, written in his shaky handwriting, were 4 words. She finally came inside. Derek Campos has never been found. The Campos case marked a pivotal moment in my investigation. Riverside was terrifying in its ritualistic intent. It felt like a targeted, if bizarre, act of intimidation. But San Jose was different. It was intimate. It weaponized grief. It left no physical evidence that couldn't be explained away. Yet it resulted in a man's complete disappearance. I now held 2 pieces of a puzzle that refused to fit together. Was I documenting a new, horrifying wave of staged crimes designed to prey on specific emotional vulnerabilities, using advanced methods to leave no trace? Or was I, as the more fringe theories on my own channel's forums suggested, cataloging something else entirely? Hauntings not of places, but of people, made manifest through the unblinking eye of modern technology. The doorbell camera, This tool of objective observation was becoming a window into a subjective nightmare. And as I sifted through a new batch of submitted footage from a family in Santa Clarita, I was about to learn that the next visitor didn't want to be let in. She just wanted to deliver a gift. May 18th, 2024, 11:23 p.m., Santa Clarita, California. The Thompson family, Mark, Sarah, and their 2 young daughters, were the picture of suburban normalcy. They were the kind of family that posted holiday decoration tutorials on Instagram and had a dedicated calendar for soccer practice and piano lessons. Their Nest doorbell camera was a tool of convenience, a way to see when the girls got home from school or to politely ignore a doorstep solicitor. It was not meant for what it captured that night. The motion alert woke Mark. On his phone screen, he saw a figure standing on his welcome mat. It was a woman, tall and unnervingly still, draped from head to toe in a hooded cloak of a deep, vivid crimson. The fabric was heavy, seeming to absorb the porch light, making her a stark blood-red silhouette against the beige of the front door. Her face was deep in the shadow of the hood, an abyss from which no features could be discerned. In her gloved hands, she held a small, unadorned cardboard box. She placed the box on the doormat with a deliberate, almost reverent care. Then, she did not leave. Instead, she straightened up, raised her hands palms up to shoulder height, and began to speak. The audio was low, but clear enough to be deeply unsettling. The words were not English. They were guttural, rhythmic, a chanting prayer or invocation in a language I have yet to identify, despite sending the audio to multiple linguists and dialect experts. The chant lasted for 27 seconds. When it ceased, she lowered her hands, gave a slow, slight bow to the door, and turned, walking calmly out of the frame. She never once looked at the camera, yet her performance felt staged for it. The box left behind was plain, except for 3 words written in a precise, calligraphic hand on the top. To the chosen. Mark Thompson, his heart thudding, did not open the door. He called the police. When 2 officers arrived, they examined the box with a professional caution that quickly turned to grim confusion. Using gloves, one officer carefully opened the flaps. Inside, nestled on a bed of gray packing straw, was a photograph. It was a 5/7 family portrait of the Thompsons, taken the previous Christmas. They were all smiling in matching red and green pajamas, but the photo had been burned, not in an accidental way. It had been meticulously held to a flame. The edges were charred black, and the fire had been carefully guided to consume the faces of Mark, Sarah, and their children, leaving their features blistered, melted, and unrecognizable. Only the background of their cheerfully decorated living room remained intact. I connected with the Thompsons after their story hit the local news. They were shaken, their curated world of safety irrevocably breached. Sarah Thompson, in particular, was haunted. She didn't just burn a photo, she told me, her voice a tight whisper. She burned us. It felt like a curse. As I began my own digging, a pattern emerged. one the overworked Santa Clarita PD had missed. This was not an isolated incident. Through police scanner archives, community forums, and direct appeals, I found 3 other families within a 3-mile radius of the Thompsons who had received an identical box within the last month. The details were always the same: the crimson hooded woman, the late-night delivery, the chanting, the box labeled "To the Chosen," and inside, a meticulously burned family photograph specific to that household. In one case, it was a photo from a family vacation to Disneyland. In another, a casual backyard barbecue shot. The connection wasn't the type of photo, but its personal nature. These were private moments, turned into public threats. The police, now recognizing a pattern, pooled the footage. It was a young, tech-savvy detective named Garcia who made the breakthrough. Using facial recognition software on the clearest frame he could pull from one of the videos, a moment where the woman's head was slightly tilted, he got a hit. The software suggested a match, albeit an impossible one. The woman was identified as Alara Vance, a resident of Santa Clarita. She had been reported missing by her husband on November 2nd, 2015. Her case had grown cold, classified as a likely voluntary disappearance. The photo from her file showed a woman in her early 30s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a shy smile. Detective Garcia, along with his partner, decided to pay a visit to the now ex-husband, hoping for a new lead. The body cam footage from Detective Garcia's visit to Robert Vance's apartment is where the case veers from the bizarre into the territory of the inexplicable. I obtained it through a source within the department, and watching it is a masterclass in escalating dread. The conversation is routine at first. Robert Vance is shocked but cooperative. He confirms the woman in the doorbell footage is, without a doubt, his missing wife, Alara. He looks aged, haunted. But she hasn't aged a day, he keeps saying, shaking his head. Not a single day. It's been 9 years. Detective Garcia is asking about her habits, her beliefs, whether she was involved in any groups, when the audio on the body cam begins to distort slightly, a low hum of static. Garcia, unaware, continues his questioning. Then, his partner, who is standing slightly behind him near the open apartment door, stiffens. His eyes widen, fixed on the hallway outside. "Garcia," he says, his voice tight. Garcia turns. The body cam swivels. Standing in the dimly lit hallway of the apartment building, maybe 15 feet away, is the red-hooded woman, Alara Vance. She is as still as she was on all the doorsteps, a pillar of crimson in the mundane beige corridor. She is just watching. "Ma'am? Alara?" Garcia says, his professional tone masking his evident shock. He takes a step into the hallway. The static on the audio intensifies. As he moves, the figure doesn't flee. She doesn't move at all. Garcia takes another step, and then the body cam footage does something strange. The image begins to break up into digital blocks, the colors bleeding. The audio cuts in and out, a burst of Garcia's breathing, a fragment of his partner's voice saying, "The hell?" And then, just before the feed cuts to black entirely, The camera jerks upward as if Garcia has spun around. For a single frozen frame, the camera captures what he saw behind him. The red-hooded woman is now standing directly in the doorway of Robert Vance's apartment, having somehow moved past him without a sound. The feed dies. Both detectives were found unharmed but deeply traumatized. They were discovered in Robert Vance's apartment, which was otherwise empty. Vance was gone. The official report cited a malfunction of recording equipment and high-stress perceptual anomalies, but the rumor mill within the department went wild. Both detectives were placed on administrative leave. In the weeks that followed, a strange quiet fell over the Santa Clarita neighborhood, but it wasn't a peaceful one. It was the quiet of fear. One by one, the doorbell cameras in that 3-mile radius went offline, not from malfunctions, but by choice. The Thompsons were the first to take theirs down. Their neighbors followed. The very technology they had installed for safety had become a beacon for something they could not understand. To be chosen was a fate worse than being robbed. This collective action gave birth to the most compelling theory I've encountered so far. In the deep web forums where these cases are now fervently discussed, a name has emerged for the phenomenon: the chosen site. The theory posits that they are not a cult in the traditional sense, but an anti-surveillance movement of a different order. They don't protest against cameras. They use them. They believe that the modern obsession with watching, with documenting our every moment, has created a kind of spiritual static, a hunger in the unseen world. They target those who watch too much, delivering their burned effigies not as a threat, but as a warning, a burned photo for a burned-out soul. They are the consequence of our voyeurism. It's a theory that resonates with a terrifying logic. Riverside showed us we could be watched back. San Jose showed us our grief could be used against us. But Santa Clarita suggests we are being judged. And as my investigation widened, the next case would challenge the very nature of reality, arriving from Bakersfield with a friendly wave from a man who was already dead. But the case that arrived from Bakersfield would challenge the very bedrock of reality, forcing me to question whether the signal of our deepest emotions could somehow bleed through the cold, unfeeling circuitry of the digital world. July 10th, 2024, 11:02 p.m. Bakersfield, California. For Chloe and Ben Miller, life had settled into the comfortable rhythm of young marriage. Their biggest concerns were their careers and the mortgage on their modest ranch-style home. The past was a closed book, its more painful chapters neatly shelved. The chime from their Google Nest Hello doorbell was a mundane interruption to their nightly routine of watching a sitcom in bed. Chloe was the one who picked up her phone. "Probably just a moth," she mumbled, tapping the notification. The screen lit up, and she froze. The image was crystal clear, illuminated by the porch's bright LED light. A man stood there, smiling. He was lean, with a familiar, slightly lopsided grin and a distinctive mole on his left cheek. He wore a faded vintage rock t-shirt and a green beanie, an outfit burned into Chloe's memory. He lifted a hand and gave a slow, friendly wave. Ben, Chloe whispered, her voice strangled. It's Tyler. Ben leaned over, his face initially curious, then paling to a sickly gray. No, that's not possible. Tyler Mendez had been a high school friend, a fixture in their social circle. His life had been tragically cut short 6 months earlier in a single-car accident on a rain-slicked highway outside Bakersfield. Chloe and Ben had attended his funeral. The man on the porch, down to the smallest detail, was Tyler. But it was the smile that was the most wrong. It was too wide, too fixed, like a mask held in place by wires. The eyes, which should have been crinkled with warmth, were flat and dead, reflecting the porch light with a glassy, inhuman sheen. The figure held the wave for a full 10 seconds before turning and walking calmly out of frame. The entire encounter lasted 15 seconds. There was no sound. Panic set in immediately. Was this some kind of sick joke? A look-alike? They called the police. Their story met with the now familiar blend of skepticism and concern. The responding officer took a copy of the footage. It was during the routine check that the first concrete and terrifying piece of evidence emerged. The officer, running the license plate of the car visible parked at the curb in the video, looked up from his computer. His professional composure cracked. "The plate," he said, his voice low. "It's registered to a 2012 Honda Civic. Belonged to Tyler Mendez." The car in the video was the same make, model, and color as Tyler's, and the license plate was a perfect match. The vehicle had been declared a total loss, crushed and recycled months ago. This was the first case where I had access to a piece of evidence that was, by all objective measures, impossible. I called in every favor I had, sending the raw video file to 3 different digital forensic experts, 2 former FBI technicians, and a renowned private analyst who consulted for Hollywood studios. The results were unanimous, and they shook each of them. The data was authentic. There were no signs of deepfake technology, no compositing, no editing artifacts. The timestamp was hard-burned into the file's metadata and was unalterable. The footage was a single, continuous take. "I've seen state-level actors create convincing fakes," one analyst, a man named David with 30 years of experience, told me over a secure line. "But there's always a ghost in the machine, a pixel bleed, a lighting mismatch, a frame rate anomaly. This is clean. It's too clean. According to the data, this video is a perfect recording of an event that cannot have happened. It's like the camera dreamed it, and the dream has a verifiable real-world license plate." The evidence was proving the event was real, while all logic screamed that it was not. The foundation of the Miller's world, and my own, was beginning to fracture. For 2 days, Chloe and Ben lived in a state of heightened terror. They took time off work, their home now feeling like a glass cage. They jumped at every sound, their eyes constantly darting to the live feed on their phones. On the 3rd night, the tension broke in the worst way possible. At 9:17 p.m., the lights in the house flickered and died, plunging them into darkness. A power outage. The hum of the refrigerator ceased, leaving an oppressive silence. From their phones, the live feed of their porch was a black rectangle. The camera was on battery backup, but the internet was down. That's when they heard it. A soft, rhythmic sound from the front of the house. Tap, tap, tap. It was not a fist pounding. It was the sound of a single knuckle rapping politely on the solid wood of their front door. Chloe gripped Ben's arm, her nails digging into his skin. They sat frozen in the dark, praying for it to stop. It did. For a moment, there was only the sound of their own ragged breathing. Then, a voice. It was familiar. Tyler's voice, but distorted, as if filtered through water and static. It was horribly, unnaturally calm. "Hey guys." A pause. "It's me." Another pause. Chloe stifled a sob. "Let me in," the voice continued, its tone still placid, conversational. "It's cold out here." The power returned exactly 60 seconds later. The light snapped on, blinding them. The router rebooted, and their phones chimed simultaneously with a series of delayed notifications from the doorbell camera. The first notifications were for the motion alert that had preceded the outage. The final notification, time-stamped for the moment the power and internet were restored, was a simple connection restored. With trembling hands, Ben opened Fold, the app, and navigated to the history. The last saved video was from the moment of the outage. It was a short, horrifying clip. The porch light was on, but the footage was corrupted, swimming with digital static. In the few clear moments, the porch was empty. Then, as the power began to fail, the image froze completely. But it didn't freeze on an empty porch. The final frame, before the video cut out, was a distorted, pixelated close-up of a face pressed against the camera lens. It was a warped, stretched version of Tyler's smiling face, one dead eye filling the entire screen. The image was accompanied by a banner of glitched text overlay that should have read, "Video feed lost." Instead, it read, "Connection restored." Chloe and Ben moved out that night. They left everything behind. They refused to speak to me on the record again. Their experience having crossed a line from terror into a trauma that redefined their understanding of life and death. The Bakersfield incident leaves me with a question that haunts my every waking moment. A question that the previous cases, for all their horror, never forced me to ask so directly. Can grief manifest through technology? We accept that intense emotion can leave an imprint on a place. The concept of a haunted house is woven into our cultural fabric. But what is a modern home, if not a network of signals and sensors? We are constantly broadcasting our lives, our joys, our fears, our profound losses through a digital medium. We create data ghosts of ourselves every day. Chloe and Ben had been grieving their friend. Their social media feeds were filled with memories of Tyler. Their home network was a hub for this digital mourning. Did their collective, focused grief, combined with the traumatic, sudden nature of Tyler's death, create a kind of psychic echo? Did this echo, this desperate, unresolved signal, find a way to broadcast itself back to them, using the very doorbell camera that symbolized their connection to the safe, external world? The forensics say the video was real. The physics say it was impossible. The only variable that doesn't fit into a neat box is the raw, human emotion at the center of it. The line between a haunting and a computer virus is blurring. The static is starting to speak. And as I prepared to delve into the final case, a seemingly mundane noise complaint from a Sacramento apartment building, I had to wonder if we were not just being watched, judged, or mourned, but if we were, ourselves, becoming the signal. September 5th, 2024, 3:07 a.m., Sacramento, California. The Ridgeview Apartments were a study in urban anonymity, a beige, 3-story complex housing dozens of young professionals and students. The complaints started small, logged in a tenant portal, and dismissed by management as typical building noises. But they were persistent and always the same. Laughter. Not joyous or playful, but a low, rhythmic chuckling that seemed to originate in the third-floor hallway every night, precisely at 3 a.m. It was never loud enough to pinpoint, just a pervasive, maddening sound that seeped under doors and frayed nerves. Finally, a tech-savvy tenant named Liam Chen rigged his own doorbell camera with an external, high-gain microphone. For a week, it captured nothing. Then, on the morning of September 5th, the motion alert went off. The video showed an empty hallway, but the audio was crystal clear. That same, soft, mocking laughter, seeming to move from one end of the hall to the other. And as it passed his door, the camera's footage, for just a few frames, flickered. The well-lit hallway seemed to darken, and the shadows in the corner of the frame coalesced, shifting against the laws of physics as if a formless presence was moving through them. There was no one there. But something was. Liam uploaded the clip to a paranormal subreddit. It went viral, a perfect digital campfire story. That's when my inbox chimed. The email was from a woman named Anya Sharma. Her subject line was simple: I used to live in that apartment. My sister Priya died in 3B, she wrote. It was in 2018. She had severe asthma. The official report said it was a sudden attack, but she was always healthy. She died in the hallway, right outside that door, waiting for an ambulance that arrived too late. The landlord, Mr. Henderson, he pressured us not to make a fuss. He said it would devalue the units. We were grieving, we were lost. We agreed. There was no obituary. It was like she was erased. Her words sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the supernatural. This was a cover-up, a quiet human evil that predated any strange laughter. The haunting, if that's what it was, felt secondary to the tragedy of a life and a death being deliberately swept under the rug. Armed with Anya's information, I began to dig. Public records showed no death certificate for a Priya Sharma at that address. The landlord, a man named Robert Henderson, was evasive and hostile when I called, denying any knowledge of a death. But Anya's story had the ring of truth. I spent days in the microfiche archives of the local newspaper, looking for any small mention. Finally, buried in the police blotters of the Sacramento Bee from April 12, 2018, I found it. A single two-line entry. EMS was called to the Ridgeview Apartments on Elm Ave for a medical emergency. Priya Sharma, 24, was pronounced dead at the scene. Foul play is not suspected. It was real. Anya's sister had died there, and the landlord had actively concealed it. I had confirmation that a young woman's life had ended, tragically and alone, in that very hallway. This wasn't just a ghost story anymore. It was a story of profound human failure. I returned to Liam's original footage, the one with the shifting shadows. Knowing what I now knew about Priya, the video felt different, heavier. I decided to run it through the same enhancement software I had used on the Santa Clarita footage, focusing on the moment the shadows coalesced. The software isolated the anomaly, amplifying the contrast. On my high-resolution monitor, the pixels rearranged. The formless shadow didn't just shift, it resolved. For 3 frames, a fraction of a second, the darkness pulled itself into the clear, unmistakable silhouette of a slight human figure. Its head turned, seeming to look directly into the lens of Liam's camera. I leaned in, my heart pounding. I enhanced the audio from that exact moment, filtering out the laughter. Beneath it was something else. A whisper, so faint it was almost subliminal. I cranked the volume, applied every filter I had. The voice was thin, strained. The voice of someone struggling for breath. It was a single gasped word. Not help. Not Priya. It whispered my name. The sound of it, my own identity spoken back to me from a recording of a dead woman's hallway, was in violation that dwarfed all the others. The red-hooded woman was a specter. Tyler Mendez was a ghost from a shared past. This was personal. This was for me. I took my findings, the archived news clipping, Anya's testimony, and my enhanced analysis of the footage, to a city councilman with an interest in tenant rights. A formal investigation was launched. Code violations were discovered, the concealed death was exposed, and within a month, the Ridgeview Apartments were condemned. It was a small, bureaucratic justice for a stolen life. But for me, there was no sense of closure. The whisper echoed in my mind. How? Why? The only connection was my investigation. I had been pulling on a thread, and something at the other end had pulled back. My obsession is now complete. I no longer sleep at night. I spend my hours in a dimly lit room surrounded by monitors displaying the collected footage from Riverside, San Jose, Santa Clarita, Bakersfield, and Sacramento. The videos play on a loop. The 3 visitors, the silent child, the red-hooded woman, the smiling dead man, the whispering shadow. They are no longer separate cases. They are a constellation of terror, and I am at the center. I started this seeking to document a mystery. I now believe I am being documented in return. The watcher has truly become the watched, and the most disturbing question is no longer what they are, but why they have chosen to speak to me. The connection has been restored, and I am afraid to sever it. I am more afraid of what will happen if I don't. The whisper in the Sacramento hallway was a line crossed, a direct address from the static. After that, I saw my own reflection in the dark monitor and didn't recognize the haunted eyes staring back. I was drowning in the data, and just when I thought I would sink, the current pulled me toward Fresno, to a case that proved these phenomena were not just observing us. They were learning, evolving, and using our own networks to spread. November 1st, 2024, 8:15 p.m. Fresno, California. The Garcias were a modern, connected family. Their home was a smart house hub, and their teenage son, Leo, was a budding content creator with a small but loyal following for his gaming streams. The first clip was short, jarring, and instantly uploaded to Leo's channel as a weird prank. The time-stamped video shows a figure standing rigidly on their porch. It wore a plain, lacquered wooden box over its head, featureless except for two crude eye holes. It was dressed in a dark, ill-fitting suit. Its voice, when it spoke, was a flat, synthesized monotone, devoid of inflection. "I am the box demon," it stated, the words buzzing slightly. "I have brought a gift. You will take it inside." It then bent stiffly at the waist, placed a small, intricately carved wooden box on the doormat, and walked away with a mechanical clockwork gait. The entire performance lasted 20 seconds. It felt like a poorly staged ARG, an alternate reality game. Leo and his friends in the chat thought it was hilarious, a brilliant bit of guerrilla theater. The family called the police, more out of irritation than fear. The officer who responded picked up the box. His body cam footage shows his expression shifting from boredom to confusion. "It's empty," he said, shaking it. But when he opened it for the camera, it was indeed vacant. The Garcia's own doorbell footage, however, told a different story. Their camera model, a high-end version, had an integrated weight-sensing mat for package delivery. The data log, which I obtained through a source, showed a clear reading the moment the box demon placed the object down. 15.2 kilograms. Over 33 pounds. The officer on camera lifted it with one hand, as if it were filled with feathers. The disconnect was nauseating. The box was both impossibly heavy and objectively empty. Leo's clip went viral, but not in the way he'd hoped. It was snatched up by the very online communities that thrive on creepypasta and legend tripping. They unearthed an obscure, largely forgotten urban legend called the Box Demon Challenge, a story about a spirit you could summon by drawing a specific symbol and leaving an offering. The figure on the porch matched the description perfectly. What was meant to be a fictional ritual was now being reenacted on doorsteps across the country by bored teenagers, all chasing clout. The digital ghost was replicating, using human hosts as its vector. The phenomenon had learned to meme. Leo, emboldened by his sudden notoriety and desperate to prove it was all a hoax, decided to stage a confrontation. He set up a live stream from his bedroom window, which had a direct view of the porch. He mocked the box demon, challenged it to come back, and held up the now infamous empty box. "See?" he laughed, his voice cracking with nervous energy. "Nothing. It's just a stupid box." Halfway through the stream, a loud single thud came from the front door. The sound was solid, final. Leo jumped, his bravado evaporating. He told his audience he was going to check it out, that he'd be right back. He took his phone, switching to the front-facing camera. The live stream captured his footsteps down the hall, his nervous breathing. The viewer count skyrocketed. He reached the front door, his hand trembling as he reached for the knob. The last thing the audience saw was the dark, empty space of the doorway as he pulled it open. Then, the stream cut to black. Not a graceful end, but an abrupt severance, as if the phone had been crushed. The police found the Garcia house unlocked and silent. There was no sign of a struggle. Leo was gone. His phone was discovered sitting perfectly upright on the welcome mat, precisely where the box demon had left its offering. The screen was shattered into a spider web of cracks, but it was still powered on, its camera app open and recording. The final file on the phone was a 3-hour video of a completely still, empty porch. The only sound, the faint whisper of the wind. A silent vigil for a boy who never returned. Sitting in my control room, watching the archived live stream of Leo's disappearance, the final piece of the horrific pattern clicked into place. My hands were ice cold as I pulled up my master database. Marissa Allen from Riverside. Her footage was uploaded to my channel. Before she fled her home, a psychological breaking point. Derek Campos from San Jose. He emailed me his footage. Before, he vanished, leaving only a note. The Thompsons from Santa Clarita. Their video went viral. Before, the entity manifested to the detectives. Chloe and Ben from Bakersfield. They shared their footage with the police and me before their traumatic encounter escalated. Leo Garcia from Fresno. He uploaded the clip himself, live-streamed his defiance, and was taken. Every single one of them documented the phenomenon and shared that documentation before their lives were irrevocably altered or ended. The act of witnessing and broadcasting isn't just recording the event. It's part of the event itself. It's the catalyst. The camera isn't just a window. It's an altar. And the upload button is the invocation. I have built my entire investigation on this very principle. I have gathered, enhanced, and disseminated more of this footage than anyone else on the planet. I have been the high priest of this digital terror, broadcasting the sacrament of fear to a hungry congregation. The whisper in Sacramento wasn't a threat. It was an acknowledgement, a receipt. I am not just the narrator of this story. I am the one feeding the signal, and I am terrified that the final clip in this anthology, the one that completes this terrible circuit, will be my own. In this state of paralyzing dread, the Visalia case arrived like a splash of cold water. It was different. It was brutally, tangibly real. A crime with a clear motive and a human perpetrator. For a fleeting moment, I thought I had found a piece of the puzzle that was blessedly normal. I was wrong. This footage didn't just record a crime. It recorded a verdict. And in doing so, it revealed a new, more terrifying rule to this horrifying game. December 12th, 2024, 2:18 a.m., Visalia, California. The Henderson family was awakened not by their doorbell, but by the roar of flames and the acrid smell of gasoline. Their Blink camera captured it all in stark, high-definition clarity. A single figure, face obscured by a dark hoodie, moved with methodical purpose. He doused their manicured lawn, their flower beds, and the wooden siding of the porch with a flammable liquid from a large can. There was no ritualistic chanting, no masks, no dead birds, just the grim, focused action of a man intent on destruction. He tossed a lit match, and the night erupted into an inferno. The camera, melting, recorded the flames licking towards the lens before the feed died. The family escaped through a back window, shaken but alive. The motive was uncovered within days. Robert Henderson was embroiled in a bitter civil lawsuit with a former business partner, a man named David Croft. The evidence was circumstantial but compelling. Financial records showed Croft was facing ruin. If he lost the case, witnesses placed his car near the neighborhood, and the accelerant used was the same brand found in his garage. It was an open and shut case of attempted murder. For the first time in this entire investigation, I felt a thread of relief. This was human evil. This I could understand. That relief was short-lived. 4 days after the fire, David Croft was found dead in his locked apartment. The cause of death was severe burn injuries. The official report was baffled. There was no fire in his apartment, no smoke damage, no scorched furniture. The only heat source was a cold space heater. Yet, the coroner stated the burns were fresh, consistent with a high-temperature, gasoline-fueled fire. The injuries were, in the words of the lead investigator, spatially impossible. He had burns as if he had been standing in the heart of the Henderson blaze, miles away. I requested the raw footage from the Hendersons' insurance company. I was looking for anything the initial investigation might have missed, some clue that could explain Croft's impossible death. I slowed the video, frame by frame, as the arsonist tossed the match. In the final moments before the camera was consumed, the growing fire illuminated the world in a strobing orange glow. And in that hellish light, I saw it, reflected in the dark, pristine glass of the Hendersons' living room window, clear as day, was a second figure. It stood beside the arsonist, an identical gasoline can in its hand. This second figure was also David Croft. Same hoodie, same posture, same determined stance. But this reflection Croft was looking not at the fire, but directly, knowingly, into the camera lens, a small, grim smile on his face. The reflection showed a man watching himself commit a crime, a doppelganger born of flame and shadow. The case was quietly shelved. The official explanation a convoluted theory of an accomplice and a coincidental, spontaneous combustion. But the truth was far more unsettling. This was not a simple arson. It suggested a curse, a mirroring phenomenon where the act of violence somehow rebounded upon the perpetrator in a way that violated reality itself. The doorbell camera had not just documented a crime. It had documented its own supernatural justice, a karmic feedback loop played out in real time. The Visalia footage records what shouldn't exist. It proves that the phenomena I've been tracking are not confined to the shadowy fringes of the occult or the grief-stricken echoes of the dead. They can intercept a straightforward, human act of malice and twist it, reflect it, and enact a punishment that is as impossible as it is fitting. The camera is no longer a passive observer or a catalyst. In Visalia, it became a judge. If these events can reach into the real world and rewrite the laws of cause and effect, then what hope is there for a mere observer like me? I have documented them all. I have amplified their signal. I have curated their horror. Riverside, San Jose, Santa Clarita, Bakersfield, Sacramento, Fresno, and now Visalia. The circuit is almost complete. The static is no longer whispering. It's waiting for my final broadcast. I felt its gaze turn fully upon me with the Los Angeles case, the one that proved I was no longer an investigator, but a subject under my own microscope. The phenomenon had learned to reflect, to meme, to judge. Now, it was learning to impersonate. January 15th, 2025. Various times. Los Angeles County, California. Lena Petrova, a lifestyle influencer with 500,000 followers, lived her life in front of the lens. Her security system was state-of-the-art, with analytics that tracked motion paths and flagged anomalies. For a week, the system flagged a recurring silent visitor, a figure who would stand at the edge of her property line every night, always between 2 o'clock and 3 o'clock a.m., staring at her bedroom window. The footage was clear, except for one thing. No matter the angle, the lighting, or the camera, the figure's face was a swirling digital blur. Not the blur of a low-resolution image, but an active, shimmering distortion, like a heat haze specifically targeted at its features. It was a digital ghost, a glitch in human form. Terrified, Lena went to the police. They, intrigued by the technical impossibility, agreed to a stakeout. 2 plainclothes officers sat in an unmarked car down the street, their own body cams rolling while monitoring Lena's live camera feed. At 2:17 a.m., the figure appeared. The officers radioed it in and stepped out of the vehicle, their footage showing them approaching the property. On Lena's camera feed, the 2 officers are seen arriving. But then, something impossible happens. 3 seconds later, a second, identical pair of officers turns the same corner and follows the first. The same faces, the same jackets, the same determined stride. The first pair confronts the blurred figure, which turns and flees. The second pair simply stops, turns in unison, and looks directly into the lens of Lena's doorbell camera before the feed cuts out in a burst of static. The real officers caught no one. Lena moved to an undisclosed location the next day, deleting her entire online presence. As part of my investigation, I requested a copy of the corrupted final footage from the cloud backup she'd shared with me. The link was dead. I contacted the service provider, using my press credentials to inquire. The customer service log was chilling. The data had been permanently erased by an administrative-level command. The login IP address traced back to my own home network. I sat in my chair, the blood draining from my face. I had not done it. I could not have done it. But the digital footprint was mine. The phenomenon wasn't just using the cameras. It was learning to wear the faces of those who watched, including my own. It was inserting me into the narrative, making me a character in my own story. I was no longer documenting the pattern. I was becoming part of it. The realization was a cancer in my mind, eating away at the last vestiges of my objectivity. I was a node in the network, a terminal for the signal, and the signal was preparing for a finale. It arrived on Halloween, a night for masks, from the city where this all began, San Bernardino, Riverside's neighbor. A perfect, terrible circle. October 31st, 2025, 10:31 p.m. San Bernardino, California. The video is the most visceral yet. A family, the Washingtons, is barricaded inside their home as a horde of masked figures swarms their porch. The masks are not store-bought. They are the same tattered, animalistic faces from the Riverside incident. The figures are not silent. They are chanting, their voices a low, guttural chorus. I isolated the audio, my hands trembling as I ran it through a filter. The words were the same rhythmic alien syllables the red-hooded woman had chanted in Santa Clarita, the same invocation I had first heard from the 3 visitors. This was not a copycat. This was a recurrence, an epidemic. The police sirens wail in the distance. The figures scatter just as 2 cruisers skid to a halt. Officers pour into the house, their body cams showing them clearing rooms, finding the terrified but physically unharmed family huddled in a basement safe room. They are rescued. The threat is over. But the family's doorbell camera, its battery still stubbornly holding, tells a different story. Long after the police have secured the perimeter, long after the family has been led to safety, the camera's sensitive microphone continues to pick up audio from inside the empty house. The sound of footsteps pacing in the upstairs hallway. The distinct, rhythmic tap, tap, tap of a knuckle on a door, and a soft, humming chant that slowly fades away, as if the house itself had absorbed the ritual. That was the final clip, the one that broke me. Sitting in the glow of my monitors, surrounded by the ghosts I had summoned, I finally saw it, the true pattern. I mapped every case on a massive digital board. The same chalk sigils from Riverside appeared as graffiti near the San Jose alley. The timestamp for the Halloween attack, 10:31 p.m. The Riverside incident, 9:50 p.m. A perfect, sinister symmetry. A numerical sigil repeating across time. Driven by a compulsion I no longer understood, I opened the original file. The Riverside footage. Marissa Allen's porch. The 3 visitors in their animal masks. I zoomed in, my face inches from the screen, looking for what I knew. On some deep level, I would find. In the dark, reflective glass of Marissa's front window, barely visible behind the 3 figures, is the reflection of a man standing across the street. He is holding a camera pointed at the house. He is documenting the event. He is me. I am not just part of the phenomenon. I always have been. I was there at the beginning. The circuit was never open. It was a loop, and I am trapped inside it. The recording light is still on.